Hello, everybody. My name is Liam Martin, and I am the co-founder and CMO of TimeDoctor.com. And I am so incredibly excited to be able to be joined by Peter from Ryan Advisory. Peter is really what I would kind of call like the BPO whisperer. Fundamentally, he's been talking to a lot of different people about the BPO industry. He also has decades of experience in this industry. And we really want to actually get into what we've lovingly described for this session, addressing the elephant on the Zoom, why it's no longer business as usual for BPOs. I don't know who came up with that ad copy, Peter, but I love the addressing the elephant on the Zoom. Was it you or somebody else?
I wish I could take credit for that, but I'm not nearly that creative, Liam. But thank you for trying to attribute that to me.
So Peter, why don't you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself so that everyone has a background of who you are and why you're the person to talk to when it comes to BPOs.
Thank you for the opportunity, Liam. It's great to be here with you today. And indeed, I am Peter Ryan. I am the president, chief analyst. Pretty well, I do everything at Ryan Strategic Advisory. I've been operating on my own now for just over 5 years. It seems like a flash. It's gone by, but prior to running my own shop, I was working for about a decade and a half as a market analyst with a leading market research and advisory firm that's headquartered out of the UK. I am delighted to be chatting a little bit today about the elephant on the Zoom because I think it's a highly appropriate topic. And just a little fun trivia for everybody who's tuning in. What they might not know is that Liam and myself actually live within about 1.5 miles of each other, yet we have not yet formally met in person, but I hope that we change that soon.
Well, that's the reality of remote work. I have said on many occasions, there's actually our current product manager lived about 6 blocks from me for about 4 years. And I maybe saw him in person once or twice a year.
Yeah.
It is amazing what you can do when you actually free yourself from the box, the restrictions of everyone having to necessarily go inside of an office. And then you can really kind of explore the space and build companies that are absolutely world-class that may have no physical location. We've personally been doing it for over 10 years. And absolutely,
Exactly.
Peter, we're going to meet in person, but in our own time as everything evolves. So I want to get into the questions super fast here because I know whether you don't necessarily have that much time. There is over the last 2 years, we've seen a huge shift in where the BPO industry was. Pre-pandemic, we were talking about the vast majority of that workforce was located inside of an office. Post-pandemic, the majority of the workforce is located outside of the office, and a completely new system has to really kind of basically produce itself in order to be able to serve this new proliferation in the market. So inside of that, there's one clear self-identifying feature that we're seeing everywhere. Labor availability is very tight. It's getting more and more difficult to be able to go after labor. And this is having a direct impact on the CX space. Why is this happening? And what can be done by CX operators to reduce the impact, in your opinion?
Well, to start with the first part of the question, why is this happening? We've all heard the expression, it's almost become a cliche the last little bit, the great resignation, but there is a great deal of truth to this. And what I find fascinating is that the idea that this is going on all the way from, it's just mainly people working on the front lines in fast food restaurants or maybe in retailers or in contact centers, certainly not the case. We're seeing this going up through mid-management all the way through to executives. I think that the pandemic has given a lot of individuals pause for thought. I think it's made people rethink about what they want to do and what they want to get out of careers. I spoke with a labor specialist in the United States a few weeks ago, and what she was telling me was fascinating. She said, certainly there are a lot of people who have remained out of the workforce because of benefits that have been paid out, pandemic benefits, but obviously those are coming to an end in many different jurisdictions. But there's a lot of people who are choosing to stay out of the traditional workforce. It could be because they want to remain as caregivers for a friend or a family member. It could be because they decide they want to go back to school. The opportunities for further education in tertiary institutions, whether technical college or university, are as available as they've never been available before. And I think that the key thing that we're seeing now in the CX space is that there is a direct impact. And to my mind, Liam, what organizations, whether it's an outsourcer, whether it is an in-house captive operation, what the executives need to think about more than anything, it's not just about giving somebody $1 an hour more. It's not just about having a pizza party every Friday, but rather it's about empowering people. And one of the things I keep hearing about from the successful organizations that are keeping their attrition low, it relates to career path. I had a fascinating chat with some organizations in Central Europe about a week or so ago. And something that really stood out for me was a comment that was made by a contact center leader. And what he stated was, it's not just about hiring someone, promising a career path, and then giving them 2 or 3 2-hour sessions to teach them how to use Excel better or what to do to make more effective PowerPoint presentations. It's about establishing markers. It's about establishing an idea about when you come into the organization, what the milestones are going to be as you move up in your career. It's also about realizing that not everybody is going to want to go into a CX operation with the eventual goal of running the show or being the CEO of an outsourcing firm. They might decide that they want to make a big contribution in terms of the technology side of the business. There might be some who want to work as data analysts because they like information, they want to process it. There might be some who have a passion for customer experience itself and want to become trainers and become the best trainers they can be. So it's really, I think, mapping out exactly what somebody wants to do when they come in, and then trying to figure out how you can empower them to achieve those goals.
Got it. Yeah, I think that that's absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. I heard a very scary statistic just recently that 25% of US workers are seriously considering leaving their jobs. And that was a poll that was done last month. And the amount of labor mobility that we've seen, in part due to remote work agreements, has just completely shuffled the deck in terms of where the industry is going. And
Yeah.
to your point, I think when you're moving up that org chart and you see that direction towards you being able to do things that you're more passionate about inside of your work every single day, if you can see that target, if you can achieve those milestones and they're laid out for you properly, you're going to stay in that position because that's the direction that you want to go. It's always riskier to be able to leave a job than stay with a job, as long as you actually have that feeling like you are moving forward. So completely agree on that one. Connected to that as well, which has been a huge discussion that we've currently been having at Time Doctor, is the balance between ensuring strong productivity among CX employees while not impacting a negative, moral repercussions from that type of measurement. CX employees are the most measured kind of industry or employee on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
Every single thing is measured. And the reason is that it's actually quite easy to be able to figure out exactly where people are doing things incorrectly and optimizing for it. So in your opinion, how can an employer drive quality without overwhelming the agent with, supervision as an example?
I think that's a very relevant question because you are very succinctly laid out the fact that contact center or CX employees are highly measured. And I think there's a reputation in the industry that if you go to work in one of these roles, that you're constantly going to be having a supervisor looking over your shoulder to make sure that you're doing what you need to be doing, that you're not surfing the internet, that you're not texting, not that phones are allowed on the floors of contact centers anymore, but you know what I mean, that to make sure that people are driving the best possible results and the highest levels of efficiency. Now, I think from the perspective of today's contact center, today's CX operation, there's a lot of things that can be done. I think, first of all, making sure that agents, whether they're working remotely or if they're working in a center, understand that there is going to be a degree of supervision. This is not going to go away. It's in any role, you're going to have supervision. But I think what you need to do is make sure that it's the most unintrusive supervision as possible. Make sure that if there is going to be oversight, or if there's going to be feedback, that it can be done in a quality fashion, that it's going to be done in a fashion that's not going to disrupt individuals in terms of when they're working at their desk, that they're going to be able to keep focusing and concentrating. I think done in such a way that they're going to be able to learn from feedback. And really, the whole idea again goes back to that empowerment, that supervision, feedback, and oversight is being done to make sure that there's a quality service being delivered, but also to make sure that there's constant improvement for the agent and that the agent's going to benefit from this.
Yeah, I have a personal philosophy, which is management by presence is something that just is not going to work in the new future of work. And when I think about where the measurement of the CX industry is going towards, it is personal self-improvement. When you look at the actual technology stack, particularly when you're talking about remote and hybrid work relationships, but this can also apply to in-office relationships as well. The ability of the manager to be able to look over someone's shoulder and quote unquote see what they're doing or what they're not doing is really not a fundamental way to be able to manage large scale employees into the future. In my opinion, and again, this is something that we've seen in the industry, and definitely the biggest and the most innovative CX and BPO operators that we've seen have been implementing this as well, is forgetting about the actual inputs and focusing on the outputs, but then also being able to measure who's actually doing really, really well at those inputs. And then let's actually data mine that data to be able to figure out how they can teach others that particular way. And then also the reverse, obviously, being able to figure out, so someone was performing incredibly well. When you look at a manager effectively doing this process manually, it can take months, if not in sometimes years, to actually identify what the real problem is with an agent. Whereas if you have automated technology and measurement directly inside of that individual's computer, inside of their technology stack, then you can actually effectively say, hey, you know what? The actual problem that this person is having is they don't really understand how to use this particular piece of technology in the workflow that's currently being used. And let's actually provide them active training on that. You can't do that inside of just a manager kind of walking around and seeing what people are quote unquote doing. That's policing. And for me, I'm always of the mindset that you should be focusing on personal improvement of the rep, and then also giving that information directly to those reps so they see exactly where they fit in comparison to everyone else's. What are your thoughts on that in general?
Well, I think that you're right. I think that philosophy about management by presence really doesn't work. And I think that we're seeing now a workforce that is much more empowered than ever, that's much more independent than ever. I think that the impact of the past nearly 2 years has been that people have gotten used to a very large degree to working remotely. I think there's a lot of people. I wouldn't give a percentage about how many people prefer it over working in the office, because I think there's some debate on that, but there's probably a heck of a lot more people nowadays that would consider work at home full time, or at least part of the time, as opposed to at the end of 2019. But you know what it comes down to, Liam, is the fact I think back to, and I'm sure you'll have the same experience, thinking back to the days when we were in, say, elementary school, and you had teachers walking around when you were doing math problems and then looking over your shoulder. Nobody's going to perform well like that. You know, whether you're in school, whether you're in work, whether you're in some type of a professional atmosphere. I think that what you just said about having technology in the background, analyzing constantly in real time, trying to figure out what's going well, more importantly, what's not going well and why, that makes a lot of sense. You know, you can get a lot more analysis done in that way with automated solutions that are powered with artificial intelligence than you can with somebody who's got to supervise a dozen or 15 people and can just make quick mental notes about what each one of them is doing, and then try and come up with some hypothesis about what's wrong and how it can be improved. I say go with the technology angle, because you're going to get a lot more watertight results that you can action fairly quickly.
Yeah, well, that actually brings up another question as well. When you see the future of the BPO and CX industry, do you see the middle management layer compressing? because this is a trend that we've seen. And again, it's something that's a little bit uncomfortable to be able to talk about, particularly if you're a middle manager. But there's absolutely ways that those middle management individuals can actually move out into different aspects of the business and really find their passion. But we've found, particularly as people are moving to a more hybrid model and they have the proper measures in place, that middle management layer is really kind of disappearing, or it's transforming into something else where I'm moving more from a manager into a coach. Going back to your
Mhm.
mathematics analogy, I'm not actually looking at everyone that's trying to work on the math problem. I'm only, out of the 30 students that I might have, I'm only interested in the 2 that are currently blocked at this particular stage inside of the math equation. And then I'm working with them to be able to coach them and go deeper on them, because the actual other 28 are doing fantastic at the
Mhm.
job, as opposed to me kind of walking up and down the aisles.
Well, this is it. And I think that your word transformation is a very accurate description of what's going to be happening with middle management. First of all, we know that more agents are going to be working remotely for a larger amount of time than we've ever seen moving into this, what we hope is a post-pandemic period. There will always be a need for some middle managers in physical contact centers. And let's be very clear, the physical contact center is not going away. I think this is becoming very, very obvious now, whether it's in Canada, like we are in the States, or in Western Europe. There is always going to be a need for a physical presence. But
Mhm.
equally, that physical presence is changing too. And I think that as the contact center transforms from those big generic buildings that we would have imagined in the 1990s, if you Google call center 1990s, it's amazing how frightening it is that, people would go in and work in these atmospheres. Now they're becoming, I'd say, much more like co-working spaces. They're going to be locations in which agents can perform their job in a fully compliant fashion, let's be very
Right.
clear, but you're going to be having supervisory talent that's going around, and as you say, identifying the individuals that perhaps are having difficulty, finding a way in a warm professional environment to get them up to speed to where they need to be. That said, I think with the work at home equation, with more individuals working from home, I think that it's going to be much more straightforward for perhaps somebody in a supervisory or a team lead perspective to be able, with the right technologies, to manage those individuals in larger numbers. And then
Mm.
again, using that technology, try and pick out ones who are doing great, try and pick out the ones who might need improvement, and then find a way to take those individuals that need improvement and, using a remote fashion, or even potentially bringing them into a training center, provide them with the coaching that they need in order to perhaps make the improvements that are required.
Let's talk about the other actual elephant in the room, which you brought up before, which is compliance.
Mhm.
So connected to the hybrid and remote work ecosystem, compliance is definitely one of those things that no one's really talking about yet, but is actually becoming a more and more important issue,
Yep.
particularly inside of our industry. I know one of our friends, ThinScale, is actually addressing this issue in
Yep.
a certain way. But in your perspective, where does compliance work into the industry, and more particularly, what conversations are you hearing about, hey, I'm a call center rep and I need all of my remote reps to be HIPAA compliant, and I don't know whether or not they are because they're all working from home.
Yeah, well, look, I would say as long as I've been working in this industry, data protection, information security has been the paramount issue. That's always been the real elephant in the room, whether it is the elephant in the contact center or working remotely. Now, what I would say is that the research that we've done with our annual sounding of enterprise contact center managers is that over the course of the pandemic, this actually became a heightened issue, considering that so many different organizations had to move literally thousands of workstations from the center to working remotely, many of which were, quite frankly, Liam, not equipped in their own homes to be able to do this work in a compliant fashion.
Right.
And I know that a lot of people think compliance means, oh, do I have a VPN, or do I have the right antivirus software on my computer? It goes much beyond that. It goes into, do you have a workspace that's dedicated to performing contact center or CX functions?
Yeah.
Are you in a position to make sure that nobody is going to be able to access that workspace? And you use the HIPAA example, which I think is a fantastic one. you've got now these different standards that organizations need to adhere to. And that adherence is very, very difficult. It's very challenging for organizations to do this. If you're an outsourcer or a captive center, to do this in the traditional contact center. Imagine trying to do it with hundreds, if not thousands of agents working from home. So yes, this is very much on the tips of the tongues of the contact center managers, of the executives who are making the decision which outsourcer to work with, or even those executives running captive centers. This is something that I don't think is going to go away. And if I can just say one more thing, the element that I think has become a major problem for the industry right now is this whole issue of cybersecurity, of these ransomware attacks that are happening, these elements about data breaches. Rarely a week goes by where we don't hear some horror story that's happening to any type of an enterprise. It doesn't matter the industry. And I think to this degree, this has become a much bigger factor. It's become a much bigger elephant in the room. And it's something that I think any contact center that's operating remotely or in center that needs to be guarding on and needs to make the right investments for.
Right. Yeah, no, it's absolutely been such a huge trend. I remember when I would go to Manila and go to the contact centers there, in some of these shops, particularly ones that were HIPAA compliant and actually more specifically PCI compliant, they were showing me some of the things that people were doing, like they would have a sharp fingernail and they would scrape a credit card number onto their arm. And then they would basically go out and buy 12 iPads with that credit card information. All of these crazy stories that they were trying to really pursue. And when I think about the remote work experience, it just adds an extra wrench into that machine. And I'm hopeful that a lot of the technological solutions that we're coming up with pretty soon can help solve for that, to give more employees more autonomy and freedom inside of their work. But it is one of those things that I'm always very interested in. Let me just switch a little bit more over to another topic, which is super important, another big elephant in the room, which is agent wellness. You know, it's never been discussed more than in the past year. You know, with the rise of the pandemic, obviously everyone has a higher level of anxiety. What should a CX provider do to encourage its employees to maintain a healthy physical state? So, you know, like how can we basically manage, which is fundamentally a mental health emergency or a mental health pandemic that we're actually experiencing as same time as we're actually experiencing this physical one?
Well, number one, I think it's great that this has come up as an issue. And I saw mental health and mental wellness become a thing in terms of popular discussion, probably around January, February of this year. And it makes sense, Liam. I mean, look, you and I are both based in Montreal. Seasonal affective disorder is a real thing. We understand that. You know, when you're only getting
sucks here. I completely agree with you.
It is tough. It is tough. You know, you can't go outside. You're having to work from home. If you do go outside, it could be minus 40. So there's not a lot to do, especially if you're somebody who's perhaps just living on their own. I think that what the CX industry has done in terms of responding has been fantastic. I've been very impressed with the initiatives that I've seen from a lot of different outsourcers in terms of looking for ways in which agents can engage themselves off hours, you know, providing them with the opportunity. Perhaps you aren't able to go to your gym anymore, but don't worry, we're going to organize an online yoga session, or we're going to organize an online aerobics session. We're going to do things that are going to you're going to be able to find areas of interest, and other people have got those same areas, where perhaps it could be like a book club, or it could be some type of a comparison of different music or albums that you do together. But the reality is, I think that my friend Mark Hillary had a really good post not long ago on LinkedIn. It was about what our lives were like based on a pie graph, and there was, you know, 30% work, 20% family, 15% sleep, and so forth, you know. And then during the pandemic, it was like 5% everything else, 95% work. And I think this is the problem. People working from home have had an inclination to, I'm bored, my computer's there, I'll just work. It's something that's going to be at least somewhat stimulating. And it's not a healthy thing. And I think that the CX community, the outsourcing community, and captive centers have done a really good job recognizing this. And I think what's most important now is that there is a view amongst these same providers that if somebody needs help, they can come and contact them. They're putting the resources in place to make sure that individuals who might be feeling anxiety or starting to feel stress or depression, they can talk to somebody, they can reach out, that the resources are there to help them get better. And if those resources aren't sufficient, they'll find a way to recommend them to a medical professional. And this is so important. I think it's too bad because we've known about a lot of these issues that have been going on even pre-pandemic in terms of mental health,
Mhm.
but at least things are being addressed now. And look, I'm an incrementalist, and I think movement in the right direction is good. We've seen a lot of very good movement over the course of the past several months, and I think this is going to be a structural shift in terms of thinking within the CX space. You're not going to see these provisions going away, and I think if anything, they're going to get better.
Yeah, no, we have a feature inside of Time Doctor, which we are naming effectively our employee wellness basically measurement tool. So we can very quickly figure out, are you working on weekends? Are you actually working outside of your regular work hours? How long are you working?
Yeah,
And it's pretty simplistic, but you can actually come up with a very good rubric to be able to see when someone is moving into that point in
exactly.
which they might become overworked, and you can only sprint for so long. Everyone needs
Yeah,
to understand what their jogging speed is. And some employees,
I like
maybe
that.
they work on Saturdays and Sundays without any problem whatsoever, but you need to be able to measure that, and you need to be able to check in and say, hey, are you going a little too far here? Is there something else? Is your manager actually stressing you out? And this is why you're doing it in this way, because it will result in burnout. And to me, you can't turn working at home into living at work. It is really important to be able to make sure that you have that sacred space. It's separate from the rest of your home life. Someone else actually gave me a really good piece of feedback, which is moving toxicity from your work life to your home life. And since they're so close to each other, if you've had a really big fight with your manager, as an example, the
Hmm.
first thing that you're probably going to do if you're working at home is you go down and you talk to your wife or your husband about it. And you just say, hey, Peter has been riding me all day, and he's saying that I'm not doing a very good job. And that toxicity kind of works its way in. So you need to be
Yeah.
able to remove those things. You need those exit valves to let off that type of steam. And you just named a whole bunch of those, which I think are really, really important.
But Liam, if you'll allow me, I just
Yeah.
wanted to say I think that we're facing a lot of these challenges, and something that I think that I've seen a lot of CX managers or CX executives talk about the last little bit too is the ability to allow their employees to disconnect. Because
Right.
what you were just saying about issues with the manager, well, you know, needing to answer emails after hours or after the shift is done, needing to connect, or an expectation that you're going to be providing feedback on something after your shift is done. This is an angle I've heard a lot of people talking about recently, where they're saying we're not going to be requesting feedback. We're not going to be sending emails to people when the shifts are done, or anticipating that they're going to be answering. And we're going to ask them to literally mentally disconnect from the role so that they can come back fresh. And I love what you were saying about you can only sprint for so long, because this is something that I truly believe, no matter what your role in the contact center, whether it's an agent all the way through to the CEO, the past 18, 19 months have really demonstrated the extent to which burnout is an issue, and the extent to which people can't really go much further than they have been going already.
Yeah, no, you're preaching the choir on this one. Um, Connected to that as well, let's just talk about generalized best practices as it's associated with driving fundamentally employee accountability, because there's two
Yep.
sides to that coin, right? And I actually think a major point of employee wellness is identifying to the rep or whoever works inside of your particular call center or BPO, what do you actually need to achieve? What are the clear quantitative measures that you have in place? And then let's work together to be able to achieve them. And here are some other indicators of people that are achieving it without necessarily sacrificing their Saturday afternoons to doing emails out of their shifts, as an
Mm.
example. So To you, what are the best solutions for ensuring that agents are performing their tasks in a timely and efficient fashion? And do you think that actually recruitment processes need to change in this regard? Because I think that this is a major part as well that we're looking at. But primarily, we want to be able to keep all of our reps accountable while also not obviously burning them out. What do you
Yeah.
feel are the best solutions for that?
Well, I think number one, you touched on something. I'm gonna take this in two parts and go to the second part you asked me about.
Let's
I
do
think the
it.
recruitment processes are going to need to change, and I think this is going to be a reflection of the profile of agent that perhaps what would have been a normal recruitment or profile of an agent in 2015 going into 2022 is going to be very different. Liam, one of the things that I've been talking with my clients about is the fact that as we're going through this labor shift, there's an opportunity to shift in terms of who you want to go after to work on the front lines. I think that we're going to be looking for people with perhaps a little bit more work experience,
Mm,
people with a little bit more education than you traditionally have seen in the past. And I think that you're going to be looking for problem solvers. I think that there's going to be a bigger focus on resolution and agents taking the initiative to be proactive to try and find a solution, as opposed to saying, well, go check the website. There's an FAQ section there, or, oh, gee, I'm going to have to move this up to my manager. I really believe that when you're thinking about how best to guarantee that level of efficiency and guarantee that level of productivity, going out and looking to say, we want to tweak the profile of individual that perhaps we would have taken a few years ago. We're going to make a few changes, and those changes I think are going to make a very, very big impact in terms of how CX is delivered, and it's going to make a big, big dynamic change in terms of how the results are portrayed. Now, this is something that comes into play when we consider the fact that one of the big selling points of work from home for so long was you're going to get an agent that is more stable, that's got more education, more work experience, and that's going to drive better outcomes. We've
right.
known this since 2005 when that business model started to really get traction, when we started to hear about work from home outsourcers and some of the clients that they were working with. And that's not gone away. That has become, I think, a mainstay of why that business model works. What I think is interesting now is I'm seeing organizations that are deploying in contact center operations in the physical sense, and they're saying that's the type of agent that we're looking to go after now. And is it going to be easy? No. Is it going to mean that contact centers are going to need to perhaps rethink about how they remunerate, how they provide the career path, like we talked about earlier, how they train? Yes, absolutely. But at the same time, you don't really change something structurally if you don't change the inputs and the infrastructure around it. And I see that that's the direction we're going right now.
Yeah, no, I've had conversations with a lot of different people in the industry, and the one thing that they all seem to be trying to crack is, hey, I was recruiting in Chicago as an example, and now I must recruit on planet Earth or all of North America
Yeah.
or all of the
Yeah.
Americas as an example. And this is just a huge, overwhelming piece that they have to actually understand. And to me, it is definitely one of those things that is going to be exciting over the next 24 months. And exciting can be terrifying or it can be really great. It really depends on the way that you look at it. And one of the questions that I want to kind of leave us off with is, and this is always the funnest one for me, where do you see the industry going in the next 24 months? We're leaving the pandemic,
Yeah.
knock on wood, everything is moving in the right direction. Where do you see the industry going in the next 24 months? Do you see, and maybe if you could even tell us, where do you think you see the like hybrid remote versus the in office? How do you see the
Mhm.
industries changing fundamentally? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So I think if we talk a little bit about the hybrid, this has been something that has been bantied about for the past year or so with good reason. What I think is becoming very clear the last few months is that the expectations individuals had about how hybrid's going to work, all that's being thrown out the window. I think that there's no clear formula for how you can make hybrid work. It depends on the company, it depends on the industry, it depends on the location. Everyone's going to find their own balance, but it's very clear that most organizations are going to be deploying more home-based workers in the next 24 months than they were pre-pandemic. Goes without saying as far as I'm concerned. I think the extent to which you're going to see home-based structurally take over certain companies or form a balance within their CX operation, a lot of it, if on the BPO side, is going to depend on the enterprise client. You know, compliance and some of these issues that we talked about, that's going to be a big issue. Are we going to see organizations or clients of BPOs that have got very heavy compliance oversights on their shoulders? Are they going to say to their BPO partner, no, we prefer to have these agents back and center, find a way of bringing them back? Or
Right.
are they going to find a way to make it work from home? It's a really good question. I think there's going to be another big shift that's happening. I see a lot more interest in the more exotic offshore locations that perhaps wouldn't have been in the minds of different organizations a few years ago. And I can tell you that the number of inquiries I'm getting about countries in Central Southern Europe that we wouldn't have even considered before, right now it's off the charts because
Mm,
of the fact that the great resignation and the labor shortage, it's not just hitting Western Europe, it's not just hitting North America, it's also hitting Central Europe, some of the more traditional locations in which
right.
this work's being delivered. It's hitting Central America, it's hitting Jamaica, it's hitting Mexico. And for this reason, my prediction is that we're going to start seeing the world becoming a lot more flat when it comes to where you can deliver some of these services. You know, at a certain point, you will run out of feasible locations where this type of work can be done. But I'm seeing a lot more willingness to get a little bit more exotic for the sake of labor cost and also business continuity.
Right. Yeah. Great book to read. Thomas Friedman, The World is Flat, one of the best books um, on understanding where the world is going. There are so many other things that we could probably talk about, but I think we'll leave it at that. If there's anything else that you think that a particularly someone in our industry, someone who's running their own CX operation, what do you think they should really be paying attention to literally in the next 6 months? Because we talked about the next 24 months, but I really want to
Mhm.
keep this as tactical as humanly possible. Where do you think their next big failure point is going to be in the next 6 months, and how do they actually mitigate it?
Okay, it's going to be labor, labor, labor. And the companies that are able to properly come up with a strategy about finding the best people and keeping the best ones that they've got now, they're going to be the ones who are going to make it through. The companies that are going to take shortcuts or aren't going to find ways of treating their employees the way they need to be treated, they're going to be in big trouble.
Mm,
I'm getting probably most of the inquiries across my desk the past few months has been around how best to manage the labor situation. I expect that's going to keep going. And if I could make one bit of counsel to any organization running a contact center, whether an outsourcer or a captive operation, it's to make sure that you've got a strategy on how to deal with your frontline talent. Otherwise, you're going to have some problems.
good to know. All right. Thank you very much, Peter. Appreciate it. And for anyone else that's interested, go check out Time Doctor. Actually, for anyone that is interested as well, we are actually providing everyone a free analysis of their workforce. So literally someone from our team would be able to go in, analyze all of the data. And our guarantee to you is that we will develop some type of interesting insight that you knew about, that you do not know about, that we can bring forward to be able to increase your team's overall productivity. So thanks a lot, and we will see you the next one.
Thanks, Liam.
All right. I think Alvina should be popping back in. I'm going to stop the
Great.
recording.
I had a lot of fun.